Welcome to the channel. I'm Dan, your host. Today I have for you a review of the HP Elitebook 745 G6 notebook, and this has a Ryzen 5 Pro 3500U with Vega mobile graphics, and that is Vega 8. So let's take a look and see what we can see. The build quality of this laptop is just like the others. The amount of flex in the screen is very little. You have to put some force to get it to wiggle. The amount of deck flex that it has is also very little. Just to get it to go down, you need a lot of force. Going over the G6's I/O, we have headphone jack, USB Type A port, HDMI. We have one of these expandable patch cable connectors, so if you are at a hotel, want more stable internet, you can just plug it in there. We have the docking part of HP's system, so if you have one of their docks, this is where it will connect to. Or if you have one of their Type-C ports, it can also connect there. And we have power. On the other side, we have the grill for air. We have a Kensington lock, another Type A port, and expansion port labeled SC. On the bottom, we have a big open vent for air as well, but that's all that's there. The rear of the device does not have any I/O on it, and the top of the device just has the logo. The typing experience on this laptop is fairly decent, just like the other laptop. I mean, it's no mechanical keyboard, but with the tactile bump, it's not really wearing out my hands. Maybe it's a bit strong for some people, but I have really big hands, so I think it'll work just fine. The touchpad on this is also okay. I have tap to click turned off because I absolutely hate it, but you get all standard features with gestures and whatever. You could put down 2 fingers to scroll. There are tap to click. There are buttons here at the bottom of the trackpad, but you also have your buttons at the top for left and right there. You also have the nipple, pretty standard on laptops these days. Media keys at the top, they work. Change volume, they work for what you expect. Mute, change screen, sleep, and everything like that. Not too much to complain about there. Fingerprint sensor, Windows Hello, it's the same as the other laptop. It works as you'd expect. It just logs you right in. However, just like the other laptop, the camera experience isn't the best. Like I said, you get blowing out in the light there. By a little bit less processing on my face than the other laptop, and of course that's a previous video, go check it out, but a little bit less processing, but still as low quality. I could get you the specs, but I could just eyeball it and say it's between 480 and 720 just by looking at it. The screen again is matte, so there isn't any gloss, although you can check when you're ordering at the factory, see what you get here. 1080p resolution is the screen, so if you're looking for a 16:10 aspect ratio for better productivity to get more of the page on there, not for you. This is definitely a 16:9. HP Assistant is as good as usual. You can go down, get all the drivers updates in one place. If you're going to be using their software, I definitely recommend it though. Even if you re-image the PC, you can put HP Assistant back on and get all of your stuff for your drivers. Things like Word open fairly decently. Typing experience, it wants me to sign in, but it all feels snappy and smooth. Same thing with Chrome or Edge. We'll use Edge since everyone has it. So using Chrome is a lot better for YouTube, but if you're going to use Edge, just don't. So one of the troubles with trying to demonstrate the playability of YouTube on this laptop is that I'm not really imaging these to show you the review, just to see what you kind of get, but Edge is just so terrible at Chrome and just all of these laptops. Like just doing anything like what's it doing now, like that took a while to do nothing almost. But the good news is that the playback quality is very decent and very smooth. This is 1080 60, and you don't get any jitters or stutters or what have you. And yeah, it's just perfect. So let's try a 4K video and see if that renders just as good. Playing back one of my own videos at 4K, shot on the Sony FS5. Still a smooth playback with 4K content. You can even move the mouse and it's fine. The interface seems to pop away and come in pretty smoothly here. Let's see how the speakers sound. Guarantee it's the same as that computer right there, but let's find out. Let's take a look at the camera. The camera is definitely low resolution. You can see what I mean right here. If we point that down a little bit, you notice that it really. So as you can see, my own beautiful voice there, that the highs are kept, but the lows are definitely cut off. These speakers aren't really doing much for you in the way of giving you anything below, I don't know, maybe like 200 or maybe 500 hertz. I don't know. I'm just earring it, but you're not getting any really good thumper bass. It's very tinny, not as bad as some things on here, but definitely better than most. So let's move on to do some other more intensive benchmarks. So we're going to benchmark the laptop and see how she does. So the first thing I want to open is 3D Mark, and we're going to do the Time Spy benchmark. So let's take a look at our Time Spy results. Time Spy gave us a total score of 647. The graphics score is 572, but the CPU score is 2608. The GPU temperatures stayed in the 50s, mid 50s I would say, never really getting above 58. The highest peak appears to be around 57 to 58. The CPU temperature is very close to the GPU temperature for most of the test, staying hand in hand within a degree. However, for the physics test, we get up to 69 to 70 degrees for the CPU. Next benchmark, we'll play a little bit of Csgo and to kind of feel how it plays. We'll also want to see if we can maintain that 60 refreshes a second, since that's what the monitor can produce. We don't really care about if we can go over that. I mean, it's nice, but we really just want to see if if we can maintain that 60 FPS. So let's check it out. So Csgo played at poor quality, let's say. At the default settings at 1080p resolution, we were getting between 24 and 29 frames a second. So that isn't the best, but for general, maybe casual play, that might be enough for you. It certainly seemed smooth. I didn't see any frame time spikes per se. So it felt fairly consistent. So if that's what you're into, maybe just lower the settings or play at 720. You can get that to a lock 30, maybe high 40s, and then you should be go to that part. But it's not really a gaming PC, but it can do it if you're using this on the go for business or whatever, and you just need to relax after a hard day's work. The next game we're going to test is Rocket League, and this game tends to be a little bit better on these laptops, at least historically. So let's see how well it plays. We just tested Rocket League and we got a very stable, very solid 20 FPS. We did see it go up a bit to 22 FPS, but with those default performance settings at 1080p, we were locked pretty stably at 20 FPS. which is fine for this type of game. It's not really, it's not like Csgo where you want to flick shot and get like 220 frames a second, whatever. It seemed playable to me. Like, I mean, my tolerance level is pretty extreme for how low I go for FPS before it starts to bother me. But if you turn on motion blur to blend those frames together, you get that cinematic look, but you also won't really notice the choppiness. So it seemed, again, very consistent in frame times. I didn't see like pauses or any type of real jitter or anything like that. Very stable and consistent 20 FPS. And that 20 FPS is low, but it's consistent. So that's really indicative of like high CPU performance, low GPU performance. The CPU is able to keep sending frames at a consistent rate to that GPU, and all the GPU has to do is actually just render it. So let's go and test our next title, GTA 5 in its benchmark mode. And like the other ones, I'm expecting with default settings mid-30s, but we'll see if that's true. So let's test it. So GTA 5 kind of got lower than I thought on the default settings at 1080p. It got at the low end about 22 FPS, and at the high end it never really broke 30 FPS, but it liked to hover about 27 frames a second. So I guess it's playable. Like I think a lot of things are playable. Your mileage may vary on that, but I would find it playable enough for the story campaign if you were just trying to do stuff. Maybe if you brought it down to 720 and you could get a more stable 30 FPS, a very console grade experience. But otherwise, so I did see a little bit more stuttering and jittering, I think, in this one. It seemed to chug at different parts more than the other games did, but I didn't notice too much of that. So your experience might vary. You might want to take that down to like 720 to get a more consistent 30 frames a second, maybe lowering some of the settings. I just used the default that it picked, like I do all my other benchmarks, but we definitely got like 30 FPS on that. So check it out. Your mileage may vary if you were to buy it. In conclusion, the HP Elitebook 745G6 with this Ryzen processor, 3000 series in it, is great for office work with some light gaming, which means it's probably okay to view a Blender render or a Google SketchUp or whatever, some visual stuff. That is where I would say the target audience is for this. You want to do very heavy productivity, like I said, maybe a CAD thing that's not the biggest project, but has some basic floor plans in it that you need to be able to zoom in and mark up and whatever. Video playback was very good. As with all modern laptops, there really isn't too much trouble with playing video back at 4K or 1080p anymore. The audio is good enough to hear someone talk. Music playing, I'd definitely get some headphones. It's not good for music playback, even though it's not terrible. All the bass is out of the thing, but it's not so tinny that it'll just make your ears screech. As for the gaming performance, just about every game, when using the default settings, changed to 1080p if it was not at 1080p, but everything else default was between 20 and 30 FPS, and very solid and consistent. The frame times, except for GTA, seemed to feel like they were consistent. Frame times never really spiking, it fell. And like I said, I'm doing this all on how it feels, because that's how you enjoy playing a game. You're not staring at a graph, checking its frame times to see if they're all under 16 milliseconds or an FPS chart, right? You're doing it, how does it feel to play? That's more relevant to the human experience. So that's why I'm telling you. Time Spy played on this one. The last video, Time Spy didn't even open. But like I said, the last video, the ProBook that we were testing, only allocated 512 megs of video memory, to its onboard GPU. Whereas this, you get 2 gigs of your RAM to your onboard video. Now, if you were to get higher speed RAM, around 32 to 3600, you'd probably see a definite increase in performance with the graphical capabilities. Now, if I were to open up Test Manager and tell you what the RAM speed was running, we're at 2400 megahertz. So it's not the fastest. I forget what JDIC spec is, but that's either very close to it or JDIC spec. So you could increase your performance quite a bit if you were to increase that to 36 or 32. And as for the 8 gigs of internal memory, you might also, while you're going to buy new RAM sticks to bump that up to 36 or 3200 megahertz, you might as well just upgrade yours to like 16 or 32 gigs of RAM while you're at it. Overall, the entire experience using this laptop is fairly decent. The form factor is okay. You get a shortened keyboard, so you don't have the nums pad on there. But that's fine. You don't need a nums pad. And if you're getting a nums pad on your laptop, then you've got a pretty beefy laptop. This is a very good office computer, and I definitely recommend it. In fact, I would definitely get these for my users, and our sister company got a whole bunch of them for their users, and they seem to be very happy with them. This processor, the 3500U, definitely it's got 4 cores, 8 threads. It can do just about anything you need. If you have some sort of web portal or some advanced email application, it's great for that. All around, I do recommend this if you're using this for the office environment. I know I recommend just about everything I review, but I'm usually recommending it for a certain use case. What use case is it good for? And that's what you got to keep in mind. Just about anything you can buy is good for something. Identifying what that something is and saying, will that work for you in a reasonable price is the question. And I think this will do. If you pick up this, it'll do the job you want it to do. The last laptop had 8 cores, 8 threads. This has 4 cores, 8 threads. So if you don't need totally 8 cores of raw power, then definitely go with this model. Get the fewer cores, same amount of threads for a very similar experience. In fact, a better experience because you get more of that GPU video memory available to you if your workloads require a bit of video acceleration. One thing that these laptops can't do very well is use OBS to encode 4K video. If you have if you're using this to film an event at the office and you've got a 4K camera because businesses can afford more money, and you got an HDMI output with a capture card going into this, it might not be able to do that so easily. In my experience, it's not been able to do that. 1080p video, no problem. If you are recording at that resolution, you're going to have a great day. But anything higher than that, you're stressing the capabilities of what is in here. This concludes my video of the HP Elitebook 745 G6. I hope you like it, and I hope you give me a thumbs up, stick around, and subscribe. Anyway, I'm Dan, your host, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.